Welcome friends to another r/entitled parents video. If I'm not too much like a parent trying to nag you, could you hit the like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our first story of the day is by Total Wink. My 28-year-old male parents tried to cancel the wedding with my fiancé, 25-year-old female, the day before my birthday and over the time we were celebrating Christmas. Strap in because this is a wild ride. My fiancé and my family have always been a bit rocky from when we first started dating because I came from an upper-class family and she didn't. That doesn't matter to me, of course. I'm engaged and over the moon in love with this woman. Anywho, we're planning on having the wedding next year. Just finished our first semester in film school and got approved for an internship this summer. We moved out of state for school and have been there for about 2 years. During that time, we've had some money troubles trying to make it on our own. So we were heading back down to see our family for the holidays, and we had made a point to set up our dinner so our dads could meet with us to talk about the wedding and later on come up with a budget to get us out of some debt we accrued trying to get our ducks in a row before we get married. It sounds pretty straightforward. So we get into town and go to dinner. My dad, my fiance's dad, my mother's fiance, me and my fiance were all there. Her dad, my fiance and I were expecting a conversation about a wedding budget. First thing out of my parents' mouth is that we should cancel the wedding altogether. Keep in mind this is a full year from now after we're done with school and in our new jobs. They want the wedding called off to focus on us being more responsible with our money, and they haven't even looked over our budget yet, so they don't even know the bills we have to pay. Her dad, who had already paid for the venue, was completely taken aback by all of this and is hearing it from people he's never met before. My fiance and I immediately got pissed because we had planned to come down to see the venue, thinking we could all go together after getting the money sorted out. Then my dad said in addition to canceling the wedding, we should give up on school. He never approved of it from the get-go and moved back in with him. My mom chimed in saying that if we were having money troubles and needed their help, we weren't really living on our own at all, and to cut back on cost, we should sell our pets. Now, my fiance has some issues when it comes to controlling her feelings. She basically went off on my parents, saying how it's not right for them to do this to us and how it's wrong for my dad to put me down all the time in regards to school, which I completely agree with. My dad immediately went on a rant saying how disrespectful we're being, even though he started it all by saying we should cancel the wedding. He already agreed to pay for parts of the wedding before all of this. The only thing we asked him to do was cover the catering for 70 people we invited. After he said he wanted to pitch in. At dinner, he said he wasn't going to throw $20,000 out the window. We only asked my dad for $3,000 after he said he wanted to contribute. He's a successful surgeon, so for him, $3,000 isn't all that much. Her dad was contributing $5,000 and we didn't ask him to do anything. At this point, dinner was a flop. Both my parents just straight up left. I thought things would cool, but it gets worse. The next day, after meeting with my mom and exchanging presents, acting like dinner never happened, which was odd, my dad called. He canceled Christmas at his house, said he wanted to grab coffee with just me and him. I thought he wanted to exchange presents and talk things out. I thought to myself, alright, he was pissed and has had time to cool off. Now he wants to go over the details. So I asked him if I could bring my fiance's dad so they could have a do-over. He said no. I asked him if I could bring a general budget of our finances so we could go over it, and I could get some advice man to man. He said no. So he pulls up in his Porsche to come pick me up from my fiance's dad's house. Doesn't even get out to say hello. I get in the car, and instead of driving out to get coffee, we drive to my mom's house. Okay, so now it was both my parents. No big deal. I go in, and it's my entire family. They set up an intervention to get me to leave my fiance in another state. They said I can stay with them, they could drain all the bank accounts I have with her, and I could start over. They accused her of stealing cash from their house, they said she was abusive, they said I could find someone better back home. They wanted me to walk away from everything we were trying to accomplish. I could quit school there and go into a more successful occupation. I could go back to my old job, which actually pays less than what I'm making now, and start classes for an online bachelor's degree instead of going to trade school. I said no. They said they're cutting me off as their son and are not coming to the wedding. I said fine. I'm heading back home. Her dad offered to help us with the whole wedding and our money struggles. If you were committed to somebody, but your parents were staunchly against that, or really any decision you were kind of making for yourself, would you be willing to cut out your immediate family out of your life? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Our next story is by SwirlyHalo43, entitled Stepdad Walks Out of My Grandpa's Funeral. V is Voldemort, my stepdad. Me, who knows who this could be. So this happened about 2 years ago, but I thought it was worth sharing. So my grandpa passed away a couple years ago, right around the start of COVID, just a little before the US went into lockdown. Obviously I went with my mom and Voldemort to the funeral. We live on the other side of the country to give you a reference. My older brother had decided not to come, since he refused to be anywhere near our stepdad Voldemort, and I wish I had understood his perspective sooner. Living so far away, we obviously don't get to see family very often, and ever since my mom married Voldemort, we seem to visit even less than usual, which was only like a yearly trip. When we got up there, we honestly had a really great time the first night. It was the first time I remember seeing my entire family gathered all at once in a long time. We stayed up late in the hotel restaurant all together with a huge table, ordered tons of food, and just told stories about the family and about my grandpa. It was a beautiful night. Eventually, at around 11 or so, I decided to go back to my room to go to bed. But there were still a good 2/3 of the family at the table. My mom comes into my hotel room around 1 a.m. trying to sneak in quietly, but I was awake. She said she needed to sleep in my room tonight, and when I asked why, she refused to answer at first. Apparently what happened was my mom was staying up with a family she never sees, and Voldemort decided it was time for bed. He asked my mom to come with him, but seeing as how she never sees her family, she wanted to stay up and have a few more drinks with my aunts and cousins. Voldemort started getting angry and threatened to actually leave if she didn't come to bed. My mom refused, and Voldemort returned to the room. When my mom got there later, he kicked her out, gave her her stuff, and told her to sleep in my room. When we woke up in the morning, Voldemort had left the morning of my grandpa's funeral. Yet when we returned, Voldemort refused to apologize, said my mom was in the wrong, and my mom continues to stay with him and continues to support his dying mother. Thanks for listening to my rant. There's more to the story of this and the unspeakable BS that comes from Voldemort. If y'all want to hear more, I will update. Yeah, Voldemort's a pretty fitting name for a jerk like that. How can you see your wife having a family get-together where everybody's there and they're reminiscing about the old times and telling stories and bonding as a family, and you go, nah, you gotta come to bed with me right now? What kind of selfish, controlling, abusive jerk is that? Our next story is by SpareAd6733, entitled Mother Files Deflowering in Child Support Court Case. So, for some background, I'm 16-year-old male and I'm gay. My parents divorced when I was 4 because my mom was neglecting the family and my dad worked too much. My entitled mother has always blamed dad for their divorce, though it was equally her fault, and will do anything to make his life miserable, even though it's been 10+ years. My older brother, brother 1, moved out of my mom's at age 16 a year ago because he was expected to do every chore, which I'm also to blame for, and got nothing in return, and would get in trouble for dumb stuff like being 10 minutes late home from curfew. The final straw was when entitled mother promised brother 1 that she would buy him his own car, but she later went back on her promise for him being late one night. This obviously frustrated brother 1, and he loves cars and was so excited to get one. You may be thinking brother 1 was being entitled, and so did I at the time, but I later learned that entitled mother was being overbearing and extremely controlling. She suddenly wouldn't let him do the things he used to do all the time, like hanging out with friends and going on dates with his girlfriend. She also wouldn't let him work if she wanted to be at home. I used to go over to my dad's and get into yelling matches with brother 1 because I was on entitled mother's side at the time, but then it all came crashing down. Suddenly, I was expected to do all the chores. Clean the entire house, take care of the dogs, cook dinner, bathe the dogs, the list went on. Entitled mother would just lay on the couch on her phone or lay in her bed and wouldn't even take the dogs out. If they need to go out, she would stick them in the garage and then expected me to clean up the poop and pee. I put up with it for a while, seeing as I thought entitled mother was going through a rough time with my brother and whatnot. Then suddenly, I wasn't allowed to do things I've always done. I wasn't allowed to go hang out with friends. I couldn't stay after school. I couldn't do XYZ. I put up with it for a while, like I said. But the final straw was when she wouldn't even allow me to decide who would pick me up from school. There wasn't a bus stop near us. Typically, I had my grandparents, dad's side, pick me up from school because they lived maybe 3 minutes away and were retired, and I enjoyed seeing them. She started forcing me to get rides from my uncle and aunt, whom I wasn't very close with, and they had to go out of their way to get me. I finally snapped, and when I tried to set boundaries, she told me to leave and live at Dad's if I hated her so much. That was a lot of backstory, sorry. Anyways, now it's present time. I had a boyfriend, we'll call him A. He was a sweet guy and I really liked him at the time. We ended up having sex both of our first times, and I was currently living with Dad. I still am. Fast forward a few months, I'm at home and I go upstairs, the bedrooms are in the basement, and I overhear Dad and stepmom talking about something. I walk a little closer when I hear them mention A and me. Now, at this point, A and I had been broken up for about 3 months and we never talked. I listened to their conversations when Dad said, "Entitled Mother filed in a court document that OP lost his virginity while living with us. She's using it as evidence that we're incompetent parents." It doesn't even make sense. This whole thing's about child support. I walked into the room at that point, furious. They managed to convince me to not bring it up to her for a few days so I won't be too rash. It's been a few weeks since then, and I've called her out. She keeps deflecting the blame on my dad and saying that she was obligated to, even though this had nothing to do with their court case. She keeps trying to act like nothing has happened, and I don't think I'll ever forgive her for this. She has violated my privacy and dignity for the last time. So I'm sorry, but a 16-year-old is a very normal age to be doing those kinds of things, and depending on the state, that might not even be illegal. Usually 18 is the age of consent, but a lot of states have Romeo and Juliet laws that say like, people within a certain age range aren't breaking the law consenting together. This to me just sounds like a desperate Hail Mary attempt from the entitled mother to try and bring up some kind of dirty evidence to prove that she deserves child support for some reason, maybe even custody. The one thing I'll say is OP doesn't have much longer of any child support age or custody, and I hope that entitled mother realizes that her doing this is almost surely going to make the kid never want to involve her in their life. And our final story of the day is by OKAvocado464. Entitled Mom forces me to stay with my abusive relatives. My mom had been seeing this guy, who's now my current stepdad. She met through a friend of a friend who lives overseas. I was originally just happy my mom finally found someone she was connecting with, since her and my dad had a toxic relationship that ended in divorce. Sooner or later, the guy my mom was seeing had offered to fly my mom over to see his country. My mom was excited and agreed, so the living arrangement for me was that I was going to live with the friend of friends, who's now technically my aunt, I guess, and their family. I didn't think much of it and was fine with it at first, until the first months of me living with them, I started realizing they were extremely dirty. Cockroaches, bugs everywhere, dirty laundry all over the floor, etc. Not to mention, my uncle had extreme anger issues. He would always yell and get physically and mentally abusive all the time. I had extremely horrible experiences with him, especially with on more than multiple occasions, he'd try to harm me by choking, hitting, and manhandling me. He would only be physically aggressive to me, which is something I noticed. His kids acted 1,000 times worse than me throughout the time I was at their house. I never got physically aggressive, yelled, or even did anything to prompt the way my uncle would treat me. I was also only 14 at the time, so it's not like a 14-year-old girl had enough strength to seriously injure a grown man. Not to mention the fact that the entire time, my family never did anything to try and stand up for me. They quite literally ignored everything that was going on, even when it was right in front of them. For reference of how horribly crappy he treated me, his youngest son, after getting into an argument that turned physical with him, ended up punching him, which actually left him with bruises, and the whole entire time his son was violent, he never did that crap to him, which is a double standard. As for my aunt, she's dealing with this Satan spawn of a husband. I can't even begin to explain how horrible he is as a dad to his kids and husband to his wife. He would reprimand his wife for the dumbest things. This guy hasn't worked in years, and whenever his wife asks if he can work to help pay the bills, he gets so offended and talks BS about how he's too good for that type of work. He's also apparently too lazy to drive to the grocery store and too lazy to cook dinner. After having to deal with this type of behavior for months on end, my mom finally returned. When I finally got to explain to her everything that had happened, she didn't believe me and just said I was exaggerating and now wants me to go visit them again? I keep telling her I don't consider them family after how they treated me. but she's refusing to understand. She's also witnessed their behavior and treating me like this, but the only thing she's willing to acknowledge is that he treats me worse than his kids. But it's not like she confronted him about it or anything. She's okay and friends with a man who chokes, hits, and manhandles her child. This isn't even the first time something really bad has happened to me, and my mom's just brushed it aside and ignored my complaints, but I just thought I'd share this. This is honestly such a difficult situation to hear about. It's also incredibly difficult for somebody in that situation to do, but you would think the thing that they should do is try and reach out. Whether it's some kind of proper line, maybe to a teacher, somebody that can get things in motion to at least get the situation checked out by some kind of legitimate official. Overall, I just hope the best for OP. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel, and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.